My name is Rachel Monroe, and I'm 35 years old. 14 years ago, I stepped into a crumbling house in Santa Rosa, California, holding nothing but hope and a toolbox. My parents had just picked up the property during the post-2009 housing crash, promising me it would one day be mine. I was fresh out of grad school with a degree in architecture, eager to build a future, one floorboard at a time. Every renovation I did was grounded in love and trust. And then came that dinner. My parents raised their glasses and announced, with beaming smiles, that they were giving my younger sister Chloe the house as a wedding gift. Before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into a lesson they'll never forget, hit like and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever been blindsided by those closest to you, this story's for you. In hindsight, I should have demanded a contract. But when it's your parents, the people who read you bedtime stories and patched up your scraped knees, you want to believe their word is enough. That was my first mistake. They bought the house in early 2011, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath fixer-upper in a modest neighborhood just off Mendocino Avenue. The market had just started to rebound, and my dad bragged over Sunday dinner, "We scored a bargain. We'll flip it when things pick up." At the time, I was paying absurd rent for a 1-bedroom in San Francisco and commuting nearly 2 hours each way. So I made a pitch. "Let me rent it from you," I said. "I'll renovate it bit by bit, and when the time's right, I'd like to buy it." They exchanged a look, and my dad replied, "That's reasonable. Pay us a modest rent since you're adding value. And yes, we'll revisit a sale down the line." My mom even said, "Think of this as your launch pad, Rachel. A smart step for your future." We shook on it. I moved in the next month, armed with blueprints, big dreams, and very little furniture. The house was rougher than expected, rotted siding, leaking pipes, flickering lights. The kitchen was stuck in the 70s with burnt orange cabinets and a stove that hummed like a freight train. But I wasn't scared off. I saw what it could become. With each paycheck, I chipped away at the chaos. I replaced dangerous wiring, patched drywall, ripped up moldy carpet, and taught myself tile work watching hours of DIY tutorials. I leaned on coworkers from my firm when a job was beyond me. Every corner of that home carries my sweat and skill, from the custom kitchen island I designed to the rain garden I planted in the backyard. I didn't just make it livable, I made it beautiful, which made what happened at Chloe's engagement dinner all the more brutal. They gave her the house. My house. By the end of my first year in the house, I had torn up every inch of stained carpeting and replaced it with hand-laid walnut hardwood floors, installed myself over 6 weekends of sore knees and endless sanding. The following year, I gutted the outdated main bathroom, transforming it into a spa-inspired sanctuary, complete with a rainfall shower head, mosaic tile accents, and a custom floating vanity I designed during a slow week at the firm. The kitchen overhaul happened in year 3, right after I earned my first big promotion. I decided to splurge. Stainless steel appliances, quartz counters, soft close cabinets built to my exact specs. When my parents visited after the project wrapped, they walked through the house slowly, taking it all in. "You really have an eye for this," my dad said, running his palm over the cool quartz with a mix of admiration and surprise. "This must add a lot of value," my mom noted, her voice clipped. There was something odd in her tone, but I brushed it off at the time. Over the years, I kept building. I turned the musty basement into a cozy guest suite and home office. After a storm ripped shingles from the roof, I replaced it entirely. I even installed solar panels to cut down on energy costs. And when spring came, I sketched up a blueprint and constructed a cedar deck, perfect for summer dinners and sunrise coffee. All in, I poured over $75,000 of my own money into the house, not counting the hundreds of hours I spent working after long shifts at the firm. My parents never raised the rent, which I took as a quiet nod of approval and a sign they still honored our handshake deal. I believed I was slowly earning full ownership. Meanwhile, my relationship with my younger sister Chloe stayed the same. She was 5 years younger and had always been the favorite. While I earned scholarships and worked through school, Chloe had her tuition paid in full. When she floated between 3 career paths, post-graduation, fashion, event planning, then wellness coaching, my parents supported her without hesitation. I never let it eat at me. I was proud of my independence. I had something real, a home shaped by my own hands, and I believed, deep down, that my parents saw the effort I'd made. Chloe met Ethan Marshall 2 years ago at a wine charity auction in Napa. His family owned a chain of high-end boutique hotels, and the relationship moved fast. The engagement came just 6 months ago, complete with a diamond that probably cost more than all my renovations combined. The wedding planning was excessive. 500 guests, designer dresses flown from Paris, luxury bachelor parties in Lake Tahoe. My parents, usually so frugal, were suddenly obsessed with details. Venue tours, catering tastings, monogram napkins. Then, 3 months ago, something shifted. My parents began dropping by the house without warning. They said it was just to see the garden bloom. But I could feel it. Something was coming. And it wasn't good. Their visits became more frequent, always under the guise of just checking in. But they lingered longer than usual and focused on oddly specific details. My mother would trail her fingers along the crown molding I had installed in the dining room, nodding with a cool sort of pride. My father once stood silently in front of the custom bookshelves I built in the living room, running a hand along their edge without saying a word. "You've really transformed this place," my mother said one afternoon, her eyes scanning the mature landscaping I'd cultivated over a decade. "It looks expensive." I laughed, trying to shake off the unease. "It's been a labor of love." My father cleared his throat. "Are you planning to stay here long term?" I blinked. "Of course. We always talked about me buying it eventually." Sure, he said with a wave of his hand. "No rush. Family helps family, right?" I remember that moment clearly. The way those words, "family helps family," drifted through the room and settled heavily in my chest. I didn't know then how much they'd come back to haunt me. The text came the next week, from my mother. "Family dinner. Friday at 7, important news to share. Chloe and Ethan will be there." I arrived right on time, as always, with a bottle of Sonoma Pinot in hand. But the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. The dining table was set with our heirloom china, reserved only for major holidays and milestone announcements. In the corner, a bottle of chilled champagne sat in a silver bucket. "Am I the last one?" I asked, glancing at the empty driveway. "Chloe and Ethan are running late," my mother said, taking the wine from me with a smile too tight to be warm. "They said we should start without them." My father, unusually chipper, poured me a glass and chatted about the drought conditions and the early grape bloom. My mother kept looking at the clock. The air felt electric, heavy with anticipation that curled in my stomach like dread. 30 minutes later, Chloe and Ethan breezed in, both perfectly styled. Chloe wore a sleek cream dress I'd never seen before, and Ethan looked like a catalog model in clothes I couldn't afford on my best month. "Sorry we're late," Chloe said airily. "Traffic was awful." She didn't sound sorry. Not even a little. Dinner was elaborate: stuffed Cornish hens, truffle risotto, roasted asparagus with shaved parmesan. Not our usual fare. We talked about wedding venues, Ethan's promotion to vice president, and the unusually warm spring. But nothing real. Not until my father stood up and popped the champagne. "We have some wonderful news to share," he said, filling our glasses as my mother rose to stand beside him, beaming. "With Chloe and Ethan's wedding around the corner," my father continued, "we wanted to give them a meaningful start, a family legacy." My mother nodded, eyes shining. "Something that reflects how deeply we value tradition." That's when the floor dropped out from under me. "So," my father said, raising his champagne flute, "we've decided to give Chloe and Ethan the house as a wedding present." The room seemed to shift under me, like the floor had been yanked away. I blinked. Maybe I had misheard. "Which house?" I asked, though I already knew. My father looked me square in the eye, wearing a strained mix of authority and awkwardness. "Your house, of course." "Well, technically, our house. The one you've been living in," my mother added, her words tumbling out quickly. "It's perfect for them to start a family. Great school district. And with all your beautiful renovations, it's move-in ready," my father said, now slipping into a transactional tone. "You have 30 days to relocate. That should be plenty of time. Be happy for your sister, my mother chided, glancing at the frozen expression on my face. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I know this is a shock, Rach, but Ethan and I are thrilled. We've already been brainstorming ways to turn your office into a nursery, she added brightly. Ethan offered a tight smile. If you need help finding a new place, I have some real estate contacts I can connect you with. Consider it my gift. I sat there, stunned, the champagne in my glass untouched. My mind raced, flashing through memories, signing the original rental agreement, my father's handshake promising a future sale, the years of renovation, the garden I grew from seed, the dinners I hosted in the kitchen I built, the little reading nook I carved out beneath the stairs. What about everything I've invested? I finally asked. I've put over $75,000 into that house, not including my time. My father waved a hand like I'd asked about something trivial. You've lived there rent-free for over a decade. I've paid rent every single month, I said, my voice tight with disbelief. Below market, my mother snapped. Those improvements? Think of them as your contribution to the family. I stared at them in silence. We had an agreement. I was supposed to buy that house. Plans change, my father replied briskly. This is what's best for the family. Chloe sighed and rolled her eyes. I knew you'd make this difficult. You've had the house for 10 years, Rachel. Isn't it my turn now? Can't you just be happy for me? Ethan cleared his throat. If this is about money, Rachel, I'd be happy to cover your moving costs. It's the least we can do. I could barely breathe, let alone respond. It wasn't just a house. It was my home, my history, my sweat, my tears, my future. And in a single toast, they gave it away. Ethan's patronizing tone was the final straw. I placed my napkin on the edge of my dessert plate and stood up. I need to go, I said flatly. You haven't even touched your cake, my mother protested, gesturing toward the carefully plated slice of tiramisu. I've lost my appetite, I replied, grabbing my purse. And, apparently, my home. I walked out without another word, ignoring their calls to come back and be reasonable. The drive back to the house, my house, at least for now, passed in a fog of disbelief and growing fury. I pulled into the driveway and stared at the porch I had rebuilt myself just 3 summers ago, sanding every board by hand. That's when the tears came. Hot, bitter, and uncontrollable. I gave myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. Then I wiped my face, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside with new resolve. This wasn't just a house. It was my work, my history, my independence carved into every beam and backsplash. And I wasn't going down quietly. They expected me to sob, to pack, to vanish. They had no idea what I was capable of. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in over 3 years. I needed the entire day to plan. My initial instinct was to call my parents and scream. But years of handling difficult architecture clients had taught me something crucial. Emotion doesn't win. Strategy does. My first call was to Laura Hayes, a real estate attorney a colleague had recommended during a zoning dispute last year. She offered me a same-day appointment. So, let me get this straight, Laura said after I laid out the entire mess. You've been paying rent and investing tens of thousands in home improvements for over a decade, under a verbal understanding that you'd eventually be able to buy the property? That's correct, I said. There's no written contract for the future sale, but I have receipts, before and after photos, and proof of every rent payment made since 2011. Laura leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen thoughtfully. You'd be surprised how often this happens, she said. Have you ever heard of unjust enrichment? I shook my head. It's a legal doctrine that stops someone from profiting unfairly at someone else's expense. If your parents accepted the benefit of your improvements while letting you believe you'd eventually own the home, they may be legally required to compensate you. For the first time since that dinner, I felt something other than heartbreak. I felt a flicker of hope. What about tenant rights? I asked. That depends on your rental terms. Even without a formal lease, if you've had uninterrupted tenancy, California law grants you basic protections. They can't just give you 30 days and expect you to vanish, especially not without formal cause. She requested copies of all my documents, payment records, renovation receipts, property photos. Anything referencing your agreement with your parents, she added. Text messages, emails, anything. I nodded slowly. I had all of it. I had everything. And now I had a lawyer. The game had changed. I spent the next 2 days combing through documents, sorting everything chronologically, rent receipts, renovation photos, hardware store invoices. But in the middle of my research, I stumbled onto something I hadn't expected. While reviewing the county assessor's office records, I checked the deed and property tax filings for my house. Their house, legally speaking. That's when I discovered that 6 months ago, my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their primary residence. The timing lined up precisely with Chloe and Ethan's engagement and the sudden escalation of lavish wedding plans. Curious, I dug deeper. Public financial disclosures revealed that my father's investment accounts had suffered significant losses over the past year. His retirement portfolio was down nearly 30% thanks to market volatility. It became painfully clear. Giving my house to Chloe wasn't just about playing favorites. It was a calculated solution to a financial mess. They weren't just passing along a family legacy. They were offloading their debts onto me. 3 days later, the last piece of the puzzle fell right into my lap. My mother, in what I can only assume was a text slip-up, accidentally forwarded me an email chain intended for my father. The thread dated back 7 months, just after Chloe's engagement. The subject line, wedding gift ideas. I opened it with a knot in my stomach. What about giving us Rachel's house as a wedding gift? Chloe had written. Ethan's parents are giving us a massive cash gift, and it would be super embarrassing if you guys just gave us, like, a toaster or something. Besides, Rach has had that place forever, and it's not like she needs it. She doesn't even have a family. My mother's response? That's actually not a bad idea. Your father and I were talking about downsizing anyway. We could really use the freed-up equity. Let us think about logistics. I printed the entire email chain and slipped it into my expanding file of evidence. But I didn't want another paper trail. I wanted the truth, from her lips. So I invited my mother out for coffee. I chose a quiet cafe downtown, somewhere neutral, somewhere public. I think you owe me an explanation, I said after she ordered her tea. The real explanation, she sighed, visibly deflating. Her perfectly done hair couldn't hide the tiredness in her face. Rachel, I know you're hurt, but families help each other. Your father and I have always supported both our daughters. Is that what this is? I asked calmly. Support? You took away my home to help me? Don't be dramatic, she snapped. It's our house, and we have to make decisions for the family as a whole. Including your finances? Her eyes twitched. What are you implying? I know about the second mortgage, and I know about Dad's portfolio. This isn't about tradition. It's about plugging holes. Her expression hardened. You have no right to look into our finances. No right? I asked quietly. After everything I've put into that house. You've made me homeless while gifting a $400,000 property to Chloe, who's never worked for anything. That's not fair, she said. You're right, I replied. It's not. We gave you a place to live for 10 years, my mother said stiffly. I paid rent for 10 years, I corrected, trying to stay calm. And I added significant value to your property. Value you're now gifting to Chloe without so much as a thank you. She reached for her purse and stood abruptly. I thought you'd be more understanding. You've always been so independent, Rachel. Chloe needs this start more than you do. As she walked away, heels clicking across the cafe floor, it hit me. How thoroughly they'd rewritten the story to fit their actions. In their version, I was the strong one, the self-sufficient daughter who didn't need support. Chloe, despite marrying into wealth, was still painted as fragile and deserving. Then the isolation began. Word spread through the family like wildfire. My aunt called to scold me for being ungrateful. A cousin texted to say I was being childish and needed to move on. Even among my friends, opinions split. Some were outraged on my behalf. Others took a more neutral stance. Family is family, one well-meaning friend said over coffee. Is a house really worth this kind of division? This isn't about the house anymore, I told her. It's about respect. about being treated fairly. But as the days passed, the betrayal sank deeper. I wasn't just losing a home. I was losing the illusion that I held an equal place in my family, that I ever really mattered to them beyond my usefulness. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner, I scheduled a full walkthrough of the house with Martin Cooper, a licensed contractor and certified home inspector with 3 decades of experience, someone Laura had recommended. He also served as an expert witness in court. "This is high-quality work," Martin said as we moved room to room. "You sure you did all this yourself?" I nodded. We inspected every project, from the custom bookshelves and modern lighting to the kitchen remodel I designed myself. He took detailed notes, snapped dozens of photos, and carefully logged the condition and estimated value of each improvement. "Conservatively," Martin said, flipping through his report in progress, "I'd say your improvements come to about $98,000 based on labor, material, and time. But that's just direct cost. These upgrades raise the home's value significantly. I'd say at least 30% more than it was worth before." I paid him extra to rush the final report, which I added to my growing stack of evidence. Next, I met with Diane Reynolds, a seasoned family law attorney Laura referred me to. After reviewing my file, Diane leaned back and said, "Your unjust enrichment claim is strong. They benefited financially from your labor and investment without offering compensation. That's actionable." I didn't smile, but I felt steadier. For the first time since that dinner, I no longer felt powerless. I had proof. I had professionals. I had a plan. And they had no idea what was coming. After reviewing my documents, Diane nodded thoughtfully. "You have a solid claim for unjust enrichment," she said, "but there may be other angles to consider. Did your parents file proper permits for the renovations?" "I handled all of that," I replied. "Every major renovation has a permit on file and passed inspection." "Good," she said. "Now, did they register the property as a rental with the county?" I blinked. "I honestly don't know." "Let's find out," Diane said, already typing into a local registry database. A few minutes later, she looked up, a subtle smile on her face. "They didn't?" That could open up a completely separate issue: unpaid rental taxes, insurance liability, and potential code violations if their homeowner's policy doesn't cover rental properties. Our strategy session became more focused after that. Diane laid out the plan: file an unjust enrichment claim, request an emergency injunction to freeze the property transfer, and prepare for court, or, ideally, a strong settlement. "Be warned," she said gently. "Family lawsuits get ugly fast. Are you absolutely sure you want to move forward?" "I'm sure," I said, steady but resolute. "This is bigger than money. It's about standing up for myself. For once." When I wasn't buried in paperwork or meeting with attorneys, I plunged into research. I learned that some of the improvements I'd made, like the basement conversion and backyard deck, didn't just need building permits, which I had, but also required property reassessment for tax purposes. That responsibility fell on the owners, my parents. They'd never submitted any reassessment paperwork. Worse still, they'd been claiming mortgage interest deductions while failing to report rental income. Between the unregistered rental and missed reassessments, they were exposed to thousands in potential fines and back taxes. The more I uncovered, the heavier everything felt. The betrayal was no longer emotional, it was institutional. For years, I'd been the one keeping their asset alive, while they quietly set me up for disposability. The emotional toll crept in slowly. One night, I was flipping through old photos, Christmas dinners, birthdays, backyard brunches, all held at the house, all hosted by me. In every frame, my parents and Chloe were smiling, as if they had built that life. I had my first panic attack sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a photo of Chloe blowing out birthday candles while I stood in the background, unnoticed. Sleep became elusive. I dropped 5 pounds in 2 weeks. The only consistent comfort came from my friend Madison, who brought dinner by a few times a week and sat with me in silence when words felt too sharp. "You need help," she said one night, catching me reorganizing my legal files at 2 a.m. "Not just legal, emotional. This is too much to carry alone." She was right. I booked a session with Dr. Carter, a therapist specializing in family trauma. In our first appointment, he gently said, "This isn't just about a house, is it?" It wasn't. It never was. If you've ever been blindsided by the people you trusted most, hit subscribe, because the next part of this story is where the quiet daughter stops playing nice and starts fighting back. What you're experiencing is complicated grief, Dr. Carter told me gently. You're mourning not only the loss of your home, but also the family you thought you had. His words pierced the fog that had settled around me. They rang true. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was emotional warfare. Meanwhile, the pressure from my parents escalated. They began dropping by unannounced, each visit more intrusive than the last. My father would circle the yard or inspect the siding like a prospective buyer, offering backhanded comments. "We assume you'll only be taking your personal belongings," he said during one visit, pointedly glancing at the light fixtures I'd installed. "After all, the improvements were made while you were living here." Another time, my mother wandered the house with a small notebook in hand, scribbling things down. When I asked what she was doing, she coolly replied, "Chloe is concerned about what will be left behind." But the worst visit came when Chloe and Ethan showed up, flanked by an interior designer. They walked through my home, discussing renovation plans as if I had already vanished. "This wall will need to come down," the designer said, gesturing toward the custom reading nook I'd built under the stairs. "These paint colors are completely wrong for the new aesthetic," she added. I stood at the kitchen island I had sanded, stained, and sealed myself, listening to them dismantle my work in real time, discussing it like I was invisible. Something shifted inside me that day. Cold. Final. This wasn't just about property. It was about standing up to a lifetime of being underestimated. 3 weeks after the now infamous family dinner, with just 9 days left until my supposed move-out date, my mother called. "We'd like to have a family meeting tonight," she said with forced cheer, "to discuss the transition. Chloe and Ethan will be there, and Ethan's parents would also like to join." I blinked. Why would Ethan's parents be involved? Well, they're contributing financially to the renovations Chloe and Ethan want to make. They're invested in the property discussion. So that was it. My parents were bringing in outside reinforcements, wealthy reinforcements. They weren't just handing over my home. They were now hosting a summit to cement it. "Fine," I said. "What time?" 7. "At our house." "And Rachel," she added, "please try to be reasonable. This is an important moment for your sister." I hung up without replying. At exactly 7 p.m., I arrived at my parents' house, leather portfolio in hand. Madison had helped me prepare, choosing a charcoal blazer, a soft silk blouse, and pressed slacks that said I wasn't here to be dismissed. As expected, the scene was choreographed. My parents sat together on one end of the living room. Chloe and Ethan occupied the love seat, and Ethan's parents, whom I'd only met once at their engagement party, sat stiffly in upright dining chairs, dragged in for the occasion. I took my seat across from them and opened the portfolio. "Let's talk." Everyone except Ethan's parents held wine glasses. "Rachel, you remember Harold and Evelyn Marshall," my father said, gesturing toward the couple seated nearest the fireplace. I nodded politely. Harold was tall, well-groomed, with neatly combed silver hair, and the air of a man used to closing boardroom deals. Evelyn, impeccably dressed in navy silk, gave me a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Please, have a seat," my mother said, motioning to the lone, straight-back chair placed directly across from the rest of them. It felt less like a family meeting and more like a tribunal. I sat down slowly and placed my leather portfolio on my lap. The room quieted. My father cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk about the logistics of your move. Chloe and Ethan would like to get started on renovations before they return from their honeymoon." "Actually," Chloe cut in, flashing a bright smile, "we're hoping the contractors can start while we're away. The master bath really needs updating." I clenched my jaw. I had renovated that bathroom myself. Custom tile, heated floors, rainfall shower. It was spa-worthy, not outdated. "So, ideally," my father continued, "if you could be out by next weekend instead of taking the full 30 days, that would be appreciated." "We'd be happy to contribute to your moving expenses," Ethan added, glancing toward his parents, as if expecting their nod of approval. I inhaled slowly, then opened my portfolio. Before we discuss my timeline for departure, I said evenly, there are a few legal matters we need to review. The room froze. Legal matters? My father asked sharply. His face darkened. What are you talking about? I've consulted legal counsel about my rights in this situation, I said, withdrawing a copy of Martin Cooper's detailed assessment of my home improvements. This is a professional evaluation of the renovations I've made over the past decade, valued at $98,000. I handed copies to my father, and after a deliberate pause, to Harold Marshall as well. And here, I continued, pulling out another folder, is documentation supporting the verbal agreement between myself and you two that I would eventually have the opportunity to purchase the property. I also have evidence of recent financial motivations for transferring ownership to Chloe instead. My mother gasped. You've been investigating us? I've been protecting myself, I replied calmly. Something I should have done long ago. My father flipped through the pages, color rising in his face. This is absurd. You lived in our house. I paid rent, I interrupted, steady now. Below market, yes, but under an agreement. I invested in the home based on that understanding, an understanding you're now trying to erase. I pulled out one final document and laid it on the coffee table. This is my formal notice of intent to file an unjust enrichment claim and seek an emergency injunction to stop the transfer of the property until this is legally resolved. The temperature in the room dropped. The air turned brittle. Faces stiffened. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was war. You'd sue your own family? My father, Richard, demanded, standing abruptly. Over a house? You mean you'd steal $98,000 in renovations and my home from your own daughter? I replied, staying seated, my voice calm. I'm not the one who broke our agreement. Chloe began to cry, right on cue. I can't believe you're ruining my wedding with all of this. This tantrum, Ethan said, pulling her close while shooting daggers at me, is completely uncalled for, Rachel. But what caught me off guard wasn't their theatrics. It was Harold Marshall's reaction. He was flipping through the contractor's report with genuine focus, turning pages slowly, examining the before and after photos with the precision of a seasoned investor. These improvements are quite extensive, he commented, looking up. You completed much of this yourself? Yes, I said. I'm an architect, licensed. I brought in professionals for major systems, electrical, plumbing, but the design and execution were mine. Harold nodded thoughtfully. Then he turned to my father. Richard, when you decided to transfer this property, did you consider compensation for the value Rachel added? My father faltered. We didn't think. We assumed the reduced rent over the years balanced it out, my mother chimed in, her tone defensive. I see, Harold said, frowning slightly. Evelyn leaned toward him. Harold, this really isn't our issue. Actually, Evelyn, if we're contributing renovation funds toward a property with a pending legal dispute, it's very much our issue, he said, his voice clipped. The room fell into an uneasy silence again, until I broke it. I'm not trying to ruin Chloe's wedding, I said, and I'm not interested in turning this into a drawn-out family war. I'm asking for fair compensation for the investment I made, and for the verbal agreement we had to be honored. Oh, so now it's about money? My father scoffed. You just want us to buy you off? This is about respect, I said. But yes, financial compensation is appropriate given the circumstances. How much? He asked sharply. How much to make this go away? Before I could respond, Chloe shot to her feet, her voice shrill. I cannot believe this. This is so typical of you, Rachel. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to ruin the biggest moment of my life. Jealous? I echoed, stunned. Chloe, I've never been jealous of you. Ever. I looked at her squarely. But this house? That's mine. I built it, upgraded it, cared for it, made it into a home based on promises you all made and are now breaking. I never even wanted that stupid house, she snapped suddenly, rage bubbling to the surface. It was Mom and Dad's idea. They said giving it to us would solve everything, that it would help pay for the wedding. And just like that, the truth slipped out, clear as crystal. We'd have a place to live, Chloe continued, her voice rising, and you'd finally be put in your place. The room went still. Put me in my place, I repeated, barely above a whisper. My mother's face went pale. Chloe, that is not what we meant. Yes, it is, she snapped. You said Rachel always acts so superior with her career and her independence, that she needed to be reminded that family comes first. My father shifted in his seat, stunned. You said giving me the house would teach her she's not special just because she knows how to hang shelves. Ethan looked visibly uncomfortable now. Chloe, maybe this isn't… No, she cut in. I'm done pretending. I don't even want Rachel's perfect little house with all her show-off upgrades that everyone gushes over. But Mom and Dad need the money from their place to pay for the wedding, and they need somewhere to stay after until they can downsize. And just like that, the truth was out. My home was never just a gift to Chloe. It was a lifeline for my parents, one that they planned to cash in by uprooting me. My mother dropped her face into her hands. My father stared at Chloe as though seeing her for the first time. Harold Marshall cleared his throat. Ethan and I are going to step outside for a moment, he said quickly. As they left, I gathered my documents and stood. I'll be filing the injunction tomorrow morning, I said, my voice even. My attorney will be in contact regarding settlement options. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out with a strange calm spreading through me. The damage was done, the truth laid bare. And in that brutal clarity, there was unexpected freedom. The next morning, as promised, Diane filed the paperwork. Within 72 hours, the court granted a temporary injunction blocking any property transfer. The judge set a court date for 6 weeks later, well after Chloe's wedding, and 3 weeks past my original eviction deadline. Until the hearing, the judge ordered that my living situation remain unchanged. I texted my parents with the court details. My father replied with a single message. We've now had to hire an attorney we can't afford because of your selfishness. I hope you're proud. I wasn't proud. I was drained, grieving the home, the betrayal, the image of a family I thought I had. The house felt heavy now, its walls echoing with conflict instead of comfort. 3 days later, I received a call from an unknown Arizona number. Rachel, this is your grandmother. Eleanor, the voice said, sharp but familiar. Richard's mother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Her health had kept her in Arizona, far from the family chaos. Grandma? Is everything okay? No, she said firmly. It is not okay. And it's time someone in this family said so. I just spoke with your father about this ridiculous situation with the house, my grandmother said, her voice tight. And I needed to speak with you directly. My heart dropped. Another family member, I assumed, calling to guilt-trip me into backing down. What has he told you? I asked carefully. That you're suing them over a property that's always belonged to them. That you're trying to sabotage your sister's wedding. I stayed silent, waiting for the inevitable lecture. But, she continued, knowing your father, I suspected there was more to it. I gave her the full story. No embellishments, no omissions. To my surprise, when I finished, she didn't take his side. This is exactly what happened with your Aunt Margaret, she said with a weary sigh. Your father and Margaret were always like this. One was expected to carry the weight, the other was endlessly protected. I blinked. I had no idea. Of course not, she said. No one ever talks about it, but the pattern's been repeating for generations. I saw it happen with my own siblings, too. There was a pause, then her tone shifted. Rachel, there's something else you should know. That house. It was never supposed to be just your parents' investment. What do you mean? It was purchased with funds from your grandfather Howard's estate, she said. Howard specifically left money intended to benefit both of his granddaughters, split equally. The idea was to help you and Chloe each get a start when the time was right. My breath caught. Are you saying… I'm saying half of that house should have been earmarked for you from the beginning. Your parents weren't owners. They were stewards of that money until you were ready. I assumed they told you that when you moved in. I felt the blood drain from my face. 10 years I'd lived there. 10 years of work, rent, and trust, all without knowing. Do you have any documentation? I do, she said. I have a copy of Howard's will and the trust documents. I'll email them to you today. She kept her promise. By that evening, I had scanned copies of everything. My grandfather's will, the trust details, and even a signed acknowledgement from my father confirming the purpose of the funds. I forwarded it all to Diane, who called within the hour. This changes everything, she said. This isn't just unjust enrichment anymore. This could be a breach of fiduciary duty. Your parents had a legal responsibility to inform you of your share. With this new evidence, our legal position solidified. And with my grandmother's support, I no longer felt alone. I can help with legal costs, if needed, she offered. Thank you, I said gently. But I've got savings. I can manage. It's not about the money, Rachel, she said firmly. It's about finally breaking this family cycle. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting to rewrite a legacy. Someone needs to stand up and say enough, my grandmother had said. A week before our court date, I received a call from my father's attorney requesting a settlement meeting. Diane and I met them at a neutral office in downtown Santa Rosa. When we arrived, my parents looked tired, defeated even. My father couldn't hold my gaze. Their attorney slid a folder across the table. The offer, $50,000 in compensation for the renovations, paid in monthly installments over 5 years. Diane reviewed it briefly, then closed the folder. This doesn't address the inheritance issue at all, she said calmly, and it significantly undervalues both the improvements and the original bequest. After nearly 2 hours of tense negotiation, we reached an agreement. My parents would pay me $120,000. That included my share of the inheritance, adjusted for inflation and partial compensation for the improvements I'd made. They would secure the amount with a promissory note tied to their new property, and payments would begin immediately. We'll have to downsize more than we planned, my father muttered as he signed the agreement. You should have thought about that, I replied, before giving away something that wasn't entirely yours. I didn't say it to be cruel. I felt no triumph, only sorrow that things had come to this. As for Chloe's wedding, it went on as planned, but looked very different than originally envisioned. The guest list was slashed. The vineyard venue became a local banquet hall. The couture gown, from Paris, replaced with an off-the-rack dress. Harold and Evelyn covered some of the additional costs, but according to my grandmother, who did attend, there was a chill between the families. Most tellingly, my invitation never came. I wasn't surprised. Still, the official exclusion hurt. Eleanor told me that Ethan seemed increasingly uneasy as the evening wore on, especially when extended relatives brought up the house. My parents, she said, responded with polished but vague answers. With the settlement finalized, I began searching for my own place, something with character, history, and, most importantly, clarity of ownership. I found a charming craftsman bungalow on a quiet street I'd always admired and made an offer. It was accepted. My relationship with my grandmother blossomed in unexpected ways. We spoke weekly. She even visited when she came to town for a medical appointment. Over tea in the kitchen, I had once rebuilt myself. She told me stories I'd never heard. About my father, about her own childhood, about my grandfather. Howard would be proud of you, she said. He valued fairness. That's why he was so careful in that will. 2 months after Chloe's wedding, I received a text from her. Can we talk? We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. She looked different, less put together, more vulnerable. I want to apologize, she said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I saw my sister. Not the entitled bride or my parents' favorite, just Chloe. She spoke after we'd settled in with our drinks. Not just for the house, Chloe said quietly, but for everything. For never standing up for you, for letting them treat us so differently, for taking advantage. I studied her carefully. Why now? She hesitated, then admitted, Ethan and I have been in counseling. He was really disturbed by everything that happened. He said his family would never treat siblings that unequally, and it made him question what kind of family he'd married into. She looked down at the table. And what kind of wife I'd be if I thought that was normal. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded. Mom and Dad are furious with you, she added after a pause. They had to sell their house and move into a condo half the size. Dad blames you for ruining their retirement plans. Their retirement plans involved taking something that partially belonged to me, I said evenly. She nodded slowly. I know that now. Grandma Eleanor told me everything. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand my role in all of it. It wasn't reconciliation. Not really, but it was something. A hairline fracture in the narrative that had shaped our family for decades. The settlement, along with my own savings, allowed me to put a strong down payment on a new home. It was smaller than the house I'd lived in for 10 years, but the moment I signed the deed, it felt more mine than the old one ever had. The Craftsman bungalow had character and flaws. The kitchen needed updating, the bathroom was tight, and the backyard was wild with overgrowth. But every improvement would now build my equity, not someone else's. I closed on the house exactly 6 months after that fateful dinner. A full half rotation of the earth later, and my world had shifted in ways I never could have predicted. My parents and I remained estranged. When Diane suggested family therapy to help mend fences, they declined. According to Eleanor, they'd chosen to hold tight to their version of events, that I had destroyed the family over a misunderstanding. When I came up in conversation, it was always with the weary sigh of parents wounded by an ungrateful child. 3 weeks after moving into my new home, the final legal documents arrived. The settlement was closed. The house was sold to a young couple with no ties to our family or its baggage. I stared at the closing statement for a long time, 10 years of my life distilled into transaction codes and figures. Chloe and I maintained a cautious connection. Our relationship would never become what it could have been. But for the first time, there was honesty, however fragile, between us. And in a family like mine, that was a beginning. Chloe confided one day over coffee that her marriage was straining under the weight of mounting expectations and financial pressure. Ethan's parents have opinions about everything, she admitted during one of our increasingly infrequent meetups. And Mom and Dad are constantly comparing what his family gives us to what they can't afford to offer. It's like this invisible competition no one wants to admit exists. That sounds exhausting, I said, surprised by the sudden surge of empathy I felt for her. It is, she whispered, stirring her coffee absently. Sometimes I wish we just eloped, bought a little starter home and figured it out on our own. She paused, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. Like you did, or really, like you always have. You made your own way. That simple acknowledgement, so casually delivered, settled into a place inside me I hadn't realized was still raw. It didn't fix everything between us, but it eased something old and aching. Meanwhile, my bond with Grandma Eleanor had deepened into something priceless. We talked every week. She visited when her health allowed, always arriving with a little something in hand. A potted herb for the kitchen window, an old photo album, my grandfather Howard's chisels wrapped carefully in cloth. Howard would have adored what you're doing here, she said once, running her fingers across a floating shelf I'd built using his tools. He always said the things you make with your hands should outlive you. Professionally, I was thriving. The architectural firm where I'd worked for a decade promoted me to senior designer. They valued the hands-on experience I brought to residential projects and often paired me with clients looking to restore older homes with heart and purpose. Then, about 8 months after I moved in, I hired a landscaper to help with the backyard, which had grown wild and unruly. His name was Ryan Turner, recommended by 2 neighbors and radiating quiet confidence. This garden has good bones, he said during our first walkthrough, echoing the phrase I'd so often used to describe forgotten homes. Someone planted here with intention. It just needs care. What began as a simple project partnership slowly evolved, first into friendship, then into something warmer. Ryan never pushed. He respected boundaries, supported without hovering, and admired my independence instead of trying to change it. One evening, as we sat side by side on my newly restored porch, he turned to me and said, "I like that you know who you are, that you stood your ground, even when it hurt." A year after I closed on the bungalow, I hosted my first major gathering, a housewarming party that symbolized much more than a new address. Madison came, of course, along with other friends who had supported me through the fallout. Grandma Eleanor arrived in a bright scarf and brought her famous lemon bars. Chloe came too, alone. Ethan was working late, she said. My parents were invited. They didn't come. And yet, standing in my modest kitchen, surrounded by people who chose to be there, not out of duty, but love, I realized something. My definition of family had changed completely. The people in that room weren't connected by blood. They were connected by mutual respect, shared values, and kindness. That mattered more. The biggest lesson I took from everything that happened wasn't about property or probate law, though I'd learned more than enough about both. It was about what it means to honor yourself, to speak when it's easier to stay quiet, to defend your worth, even when others say you're making trouble. For most of my life, I had carried the label of the strong one, the one who didn't need help, didn't ask for recognition, and was expected to give more than she got. Breaking free from that story was painful, but necessary. Real family, I've learned, isn't just who shares your DNA. It's who respects your boundaries, sees your worth, and shows up without conditions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say, "This ends with me." Losing that house helped me find myself, and I'd take that trade again every single time. If you've made it to the end of my story, thank you. It means more than I can say. This wasn't just about a house. It was about waking up to the ways I had been quietly undervalued for years, even by the people who were supposed to protect me. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between peace and self-respect? Between keeping the family harmony and honoring your truth? Please consider subscribing if you believe, like I do now, that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is draw a line, even if it shakes everything around you. If I could offer any advice from this journey, it would be this. You don't owe anyone silence when that silence costs you your peace. Speak up, even if your voice shakes. Set boundaries, even if it makes others uncomfortable. And don't confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice. They are not the same thing. You are allowed to outgrow roles your family handed you. You are allowed to redefine what love and support look like. And yes, you are allowed to walk away from those who refuse to respect who you've become. In the end, the most valuable thing I rebuilt wasn't my home. It was myself. So please, drop a comment below, share your own story, or even just send a few words of encouragement. I'll be reading them all. And if you're facing your own version of what I went through, I see you. You're not alone. Let's keep standing up for each other and for ourselves.